And we are live. Welcome, folks, to episode 3505, 3505 of the Survival Podcast. And we got a good one for you today. We're going to be talking about food sovereignty. I've mentioned this topic for a show discussion, a subject a few times over the past few weeks. And it's really taken me this long to put together everything that I wanted to say on it. And even with that, this will probably be a long episode today. It's only scratching the surface. So we are talking about food sovereignty today, and what the path there looks like. And I don't want anybody to take what I'm about to say the wrong way, because I think producing your own food is a completely valid path to food sovereignty, for some people, period. And what I mean by that is not everybody's going to do it. We're going to dig into that today. And even the people who do grow a great deal of their own food, yours truly included, there's still a lot of things we like to eat that don't necessarily grow where we are at or are not available year round and things like that. So with that in mind, we all need to rely on some level of a supply chain. And the supply chain right now is where all of the problems really arise. We're going to be talking about food sovereignty today. The word Bitcoin, other than right now, probably will not even come up, because I don't care how people pay for things. If the person wants the compensation and the person has the compensation and the exchange is made, then good. But there is one thing that we will talk about today that has a ring of Bitcoin to it anyway, and that's centralized versus decentralized. And when you start actually examining the real problems, it comes down to, like so many other things in life, it's centralization that's the problem. It's having central planners and central planning managers who have decided that they're smarter than the market for hundreds of millions of people. Just in the United States, right? 300 plus million people. The central planner at USDA that figures out exactly how they're going to subsidize corn and soy and wheat and rice this year knows more than you. He knows more than the market. He knows more than he knows more than everybody. And there's 100 of them that all collectively make this stupid ass decision-making process appear to function. And if you're in the government, the beauty is the bigger the problem, the more your need to exist is justified. So when you have these people that are supposedly solving problems, you realize that if they did solve the problems, we wouldn't need them anymore and they'd work themselves out of a job. And again, this all stems from centralization. Centralization in so many areas that we don't think of that we're going to cover today. Like centralization in the concept of insurance. Like, I know that might not make sense right now, but there's an issue there. Centralization from a standpoint of things like financing and loans. And I'm actually going to give you a solution that already exists today. For that one, it's probably not a big enough solution for everyone, but it's a good one to know about, and it's a good model to emulate. Centralization of seeds, pesticides, fertilizers, etc. Everything's centralized. Distribution systems are centralized. And this is just not the way that humanity has lived for the majority of the time in our lives. We've lived agriculturally, specifically, very, very regional. Until we got to a point where we had things like trains and airplanes and trucks, the idea that the majority of the food you eat would be shipped in from somewhere else was insane. Like long distance importation of food, not that long ago, a few thousand years back in the a little more than a few thousand years, but thousands of years ago, in the heyday of like the Egyptian Empire, was like moving, grain from North Africa to Italy. That was a massive undertaking back then. And it was also something that led to part of Rome's falling apart when Egypt had crop failures, right? So this idea that it makes perfect sense for us to be eating food that comes from all over the world all the time, all jumbled up together, is a very new idea. And I don't have a problem with free markets and imports and exports. I think those are all fine things. But everything is part of that distribution system, and that is a problem. Again, the financing, the economics, the education, all of it is centralized. And when you have central planners and centralization, they literally get to decide what other people think. Not just what they do, but what they think and how they think. And so we're going to pick all this apart today. Before we do, let's go ahead and thank our sponsors of the day today. Sponsor today, number one today, is Canine Academy. That's Joel Riles, my good friend and contemporary as a podcaster as well. Great dude. He also runs Fortress Canine, where he trains some of the best protection dogs you will find anywhere on the planet. His training methodology is second to none. But the thing is, when it comes to training dogs, whether you're training a protection dog or you just don't want a dog to eat your chickens, it all starts with core obedience, and it all starts with training the trainer. Dogs are easy. People are hard. Dogs don't really break rules. If you follow rules with a dog, then the dog follows the rules that you lay down. But when you break the rules, the dog breaks the rules, and then everybody's unhappy. You can learn to train your dog by learning to train yourself at canineacademy.us. Check out all the programs that are available there. Learn how to make your dog not just a great dog, but a great member of your family and a good helper on your homestead at Canine Academy. You can take the basics course. There's a monthly option. There's a completely free problem-solving library that you probably should at least check that out and learn more about Joel and the way that he teaches. I helped Joel put this entire program together. It's part of a barter deal where I got Belle, my Malinois Shepherd cross, from Joel. Beautiful dog. And this is just a great way to teach yourself, because there are no bad dogs. There's just bad trainers and bad owners. Next up, USABerkeyFilters.com. Jeff the Berkey guy Gleason has been in the business of selling Berkey water filtration stuff for over 20 years at this point. He's one of the top distributors for Berkey in the country. That means if there's a problem, he can get it handled for you. He's been supporting this show on and off since really the very beginning. I think 2010 was the first time that Jeff and I started working together on a sponsorship deal. It's 2024. That's 14 years. We're still working together. Check him out today at usaberkeyfilters.com. With that, let's go ahead and jump on into it. And I will tell you right now, guys, I have not been paying attention to the live stream chat. It is very important that if you want me to actually see anything you ask or any talking point you give me, put the word question in all caps first if you're on the live stream. If you're not on the live stream, well, that doesn't really matter. And I'll do my best here solo today. One man, one eye. Jim says, Jack is a jerk. I tell him off. And thanks, Jim. I appreciate that. Anyway, let's start off with where I kind of alluded to right at the beginning. When you talk about food sovereignty, especially in the homesteader, permaculture, prepper, self-sufficiency, self-reliance, all the gamut of the things that were involved with space, the first thing people think of is, well, gardening and backyard livestock. And again, I am not saying that those are not completely valid components to food sovereignty. I'm just saying they're not it. And they're so far from it that they're really even collectively for like the human race, they're not even a drop in a bucket. They're more like a drop in a lake. Really. Now, the person that's doing it, if they're doing it well, and it's well thought out, well designed, they're putting the effort in, and they're getting, 50, 60, 70% of their food from their own efforts, then it's definitely a huge step to food sovereignty for them. So don't take this the wrong way. I'm just saying it's not enough. It's not enough. We need from backyards to broad acres and everything in between. Because bluntly, people have jobs and specialties. And the person who is a high-level engineer that works his ass off designing airplanes, right, and systems for airplanes, and works 60 hours a week, probably isn't going to grow that much of his own food. I'm not saying he can. I know plenty of engineers that are also gardeners, and they like it. But in the end, most of them won't, right? People have jobs. People have specialties. You have doctors that work in ERs during their residency that are working 16, 18-hour shifts. You think that guy has a lot of time to garden, right? We have people that do all sorts of things, all sorts of specialties. And we need them doing those things. Like, I don't spend a lot of time in a doctor's office, but if I get in a car wreck and there's a yield sign in my spleen, I want to go to a surgeon. I want him focused on my spleen and putting me back together, not whether or not his tomatoes are going to ripen on time. I mean, if he wants to grow tomatoes, fine, but you get my point. Not everybody has the time or is willing to make the time to grow their own food, and that's okay. If everybody did everything for themselves, there would be no market for commerce at all, right? And we love the market, so we shouldn't turn our backs on it and ignore it. And additionally, demand exceeds local production. And I mean that in many ways. When it comes to just high-quality food at all, and not even worried about whether it's regenerative or permaculture or organic or whatever, just straight up, food itself is not produced locally to the demand that exists locally. So there's an opportunity there. And here's what I mean. If you go to like farm country, Iowa, right, Kansas, Nebraska, etc., you will drive past fields that are so huge, they go to the horizon with corn or wheat, right, or soy. And there's no local food available. The whole place, like, they're farming in, 1,000-acre blocks, 40,000-acre blocks, some of them. And there's no food. There's no local food at all. Well, I mean, none. You can't buy any. You go to the grocery store, all the food is from California, South America, Australia, New Zealand, and Europe. There's no local food at all. Why? Well, because most of what they're growing is sold outside of where they live. So we have that opportunity. Now, when you get into like free, grass-fed beef, you get into organically grown produce, you get into locally grown produce. There's not even, there is so much more demand than there is supply that the demand actually wanes because it can't find the supply. I bet you some of you guys in the live stream right now, just say me if it's you, have tried to find food like this nearby and couldn't do it and eventually gave up. Again, if that's you, just put me in the live chat, and maybe that'll just show kind of the reality is that most people cannot find enough food locally versus what they're willing to spend and what they want to buy. So we have an opportunity there. Farmers and ranchers also need markets. If we want people to farm and we want people to ranch and we want people to restore ecosystems and we want people to do better and stop using all the toxins and stop using all the poisons, well, they need somebody to buy their shit. So if we're all going to take the approach of I'm going to grow all my own food, then there's no place for the farmer or the rancher to sell food to anymore. So we need to be thinking bigger than this. And we don't really understand the scope, how big this problem is. What I'm bringing up for those that are on the live stream anyway right now is a piece of a presentation I did at Permaculture Voices a long time ago. This is 7 years ago. I think it's actually older than that. But I brought this up just for the one slide in it. This was a presentation on taking regenerative agriculture forward in mainstream. And one of the things I wanted to drive home to the market or to the audience that I was doing this talk for is the same thing I'm trying to do now, which is to help people understand how big the issue is. So what I did is I went to the Data Food Marketing Institute, the FMI, so that I could find like the best numbers we had for what's a supermarket in the United States on average. You got little ones, big ones, mega marts, whatever. How does it all aggregate and average out? And this is, again, 8-9 years ago. These numbers have only gotten bigger since then, okay? The average supermarket in America will do $500,000 in weekly sales. They will have over 42,000 individual items for sale. They'll occupy 46,000 square feet. There's 37,000 of them in America. So take all these numbers and multiply them by 37,000. Nationally, they employ 3.4 million people. Almost 3.5 million people are employed by supermarkets. The total sales of all of them put together, $638 billion annually. It's easily $700 billion by now. So 70% of $1 trillion just in supermarket sales. And they operate with an average net profit of 1.5%. They only make 1.5% profit by the time it's all over with. And so think about how efficient that entire system must be for all of those 37,000 markets to stay open, operating at a 1.5% profit margin. And I know it's easy to say, you know, they're price gouging us, it's Bidenflation, it's shrinkflation, whatever, but these are responses to markets. In the end, these stores don't make very much money relative to margin. They make a lot of money because they sell a lot of volume. But volume's my point here. This idea that we're going to fix this problem because we're all going to grow our own food just does not stand against those numbers. If you live in a large market like Dallas, Fort Worth, Atlanta, Jacksonville, Florida, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, just think of how many of those supermarkets exist within a few miles of your house, and now realize the rest of the world has to be fed too. The volume is insane. There's 9 billion, 8 billion people in the world, something like that. We all have to eat. And again, I want to just point this out as we go through this. Look for centralization and see how centralization is the problem and decentralization mitigates that problem. I think that we need to kind of break this into categories about what needs doing. And some of these are categories of things I'm not very enthusiastic about. It doesn't mean that we can ignore them. It doesn't mean that somebody doesn't need to get out there and figure out how to do them. Like, we all have our strengths and weaknesses. I try to come at this from a standpoint of being an educator, teaching people what can be done, what's possible, and how to do it. But there's a place for legislation too, because a lot of the problems we have are due to legislation. And it's either because legislation favors the centralized path or legislation literally prohibits the decentralized path. And usually it's somewhere in the middle. Like, it is possible to get around the centralized path, but it's not easy. And what are people going to do? What is easiest? And if you're a farmer, you've got so much on your plate just to get the bills paid. You're not going to purposely seek out things that are more complicated. You're just not going to do it. So we need state level inspection on livestock. Now, here's what I'm going to say. Like, be careful that you don't think that I am advocating for government here. I'm not. I'm a pragmatist, and I accept that the blocks that come from government are not going to go away anytime soon. And you fight fire with fire, and you fight, in some instances anyway, government with government. And in our system, and I'm speaking mainly of the United States right now, you have two strong forces in government, two truly strong forces in government. And I don't mean like legislative, judicial, executive. No, you got federal and state. Those are your two strong forces of government. And the only thing that's strong enough to really push back on federal law is state law under state sovereignty. And so when I say we need to have state level inspections for livestock processing, what I'm talking about is getting things done at the state level that says if Bill grows cattle and Bill wants to have his cattle cut up into pieces, and it's okay for Bill to sell his cow to Brady here, and Brady can buy the whole cow processed at that facility, all cut up into pieces, and take that cow home and eat it, and Brady doesn't die, then there's no reason that Tom couldn't have the cow cut up into lots of pieces, take delivery of those pieces, and sell them out in parts and pieces, which is exactly what doesn't happen in most states right now. And one of the things people will tell me is, well, in Indiana, they already have that. Well, it's great for Indiana. And a lot of the stuff I'm going to say that we need today, we do have in pieces and parts all over the place. What we need is centralized decentralization, kind of a way for a farmer, an investor, a landowner, a consumer to look at the whole landscape and say, how do we cobble together what we need to make this work in our backyard? What's already there? What needs building? Most of it has been built, but like the state level inspection thing, you can't do it in Texas. It doesn't exist. You can't raise chickens in Texas, have them processed by a Texas state inspector, which they exist, at a state level inspected slaughterhouse, and then sell that chicken to somebody else. Can't do it. This is directly because of big food. Big food, and this is one of the biggest things that actually needs legislative action to change. And this one needs to happen. And I think it'd be great if there was, a group in every state dedicated to getting this done in their state. And that's I think that part of why I'm doing the show today is so people find the place where they fit in. Like, I'm not the guy for this. Because if I did get to go speak to them, I'd probably speak all eloquently and all passionately and in a way that would be very compelling until one of those idiots stood up and said something stupid, and then I'm going to go off, right? I am not the guy for politics. I mean, like, you're all a bunch of dumb fucks. You don't know anything about growing food, but you want to regulate food. How about you get the fuck out of the way? See, that's not going to work. That's what they need to hear, but it's not going to work. We need somebody working on this in every state. And I really think to get something that big done, you need people that that's my thing. We're not going to do anything else until we get this done. And exactly what that looks like probably will differ by state, because politics is both the art of the possible and the art of the probable. We also need to increase the number of farmers through outreach and education. We don't have enough farmers. We have plenty of people growing shit they call food, but it's not food. That's why you can be in the middle of corn and bean country and you can't buy any food that was grown within 100 miles of your house. Unless you're buying it from Barbara next door. You just can't do it. It doesn't exist. We do not have enough people farming. We have plenty of people using a mechanized industrial process to make seed oils and fuel. Okay? Right now, 40% of the corn grown in America is eaten by no one and nothing. Not by humans, not by cows, not by pigs, not by deer. 40% of the corn that we grow in America today is distilled into ethanol to be added to our fuel system at a net energy loss. So when people start talking, well, we need to feed the world, Jack, you said it. If we're growing less grains and all, bullshit. Bullshit. We could cut the corn crop by 40% right now and have no impact on people's ability to eat at all. And we have a lot of other problems too, as more and more people are eating animal-based diets and they're looking for options like organic. Maybe you don't have somebody locally doing pastured chicken. You're willing to buy organic chicken. The farmer, again, right? That's what I'm saying with legislation. We need to get things out of their way and they need to be empowered, because there is not enough organic grain to feed organic chickens for the U.S. demand for the market right now. I'm not saying organic's perfect. Organic has all of its own problems, but most of the feed that farmers are feeding chickens today who are doing things organically, and that includes pastured poultry that's given supplemental organic feed, the grain largely comes from outside of the United States. So not only do we have massive fields of food, but you can't get anything to eat from that field for humans locally. We have massive amounts of grain, but we don't have grain that's the high quality grain for livestock that are organic or regenerative. See what I'm saying? We need to empower farmers and we need to create more farmers. And that is a legislative issue. We need to move away from the massive grain crop mentality. Who can afford to become a farmer today, starting from zero, and farm corn, beans, and wheat and rye, right? Or potatoes, some sort of, 4-crop rotation? Who can afford to do it? The answer is almost no one can afford to do it out of the gate. It's impossible. You have to be in the thousands of acres to be financially viable. You need millions of dollars in financing to be financially viable, and you're not even financially viable. If it wasn't for all the subsidy money that comes in from the government and a bunch of other crap we'll talk about, that wouldn't even be financially viable. So how are you going to make more farmers when we turn farming into an industry instead of a specialty? And the answer is you're not. So the only way we're going to get there is to move people off of this. And that doesn't mean that they shouldn't farm any grains or corns. There's opportunity for that. But it doesn't need to be the only thing that they're doing, and it's not the quality food that's lacking. We're not lacking for soybeans, right? We're not lacking for corn. We're not lacking for wheat or other legumes. What we're lacking for is high quality product, both animal and plant-based material. We're just lacking for it. And we do need to move more toward animal and animal product. Now, the entire movement of agriculture is toward vegan vegetarianism. And this is, again, if it comes from government, it's probably bad advice. You know, don't take that too far. If they tell you to look both ways before you cross the street, don't not do it despite them and get run over. But pretty much anything that's more complex than what to do before you cross the street comes from government is bad advice. It really is. I'm sorry, but it is. And so when we have the government and the NGOs, people like the WEF, pushing everybody toward this vegan plant-based crap, the first thing you need to understand is the diet of the average American is already plant-based. Think about the term they're choosing to use there. See, they don't want to say plants exclusively, or exclusively plant-based. Because when they say that, the agenda becomes clear, right? And the agenda is we don't want you to eat meat at all. So they just say plant-based. Well, here's the problem with that. What does plant-based mean? It would mean that the majority of your calories come from plants. Okay, the average American gets the majority of their food calories from plants today, right now, full stop. And the health of the country's never been worse. So we are healthier eating animal products, but we cannot restore ecosystems without it. Not at the scale we're talking here. We took 50 million bison out of North America. We took millions and millions of elk out of North America. There were elk in freaking Maine. There were elk in freaking Florida. There were elk in Texas and Arkansas. Now we have some little herds of elk, but I mean, there were like 4 species of elk when European settlement began. We're down to 1. There's 3 species of elk that do not even exist anymore. We have stripped the land of its managers. And megafauna, along with birds, are a huge part of land management. There is no place in nature where you have strong vegetative growth and no animals. It doesn't exist. The carbon cycle requires the interaction between animal and plant to function properly. It requires healthy ecosystems above the ground and below the ground. We cannot fix our environmental problems without embracing animals in agriculture. And humans do better on high quality protein and fat from animals than they do any other food source. You don't have to agree with me. It's okay. There's plenty of opportunity in this space to grow fruits and vegetables and some grains and some legumes. If that's what you want to eat, plenty. We will not run out of customers just because I said what I said about animals. But all we have to do is look at the people that have lived on vegan diets their whole life and look at the people today that are sitting in the ketovore, carnivore world and look at them physically. And that's all you really have to do. If you want to argue that point, go look at the results. Go look at the fruit of the tree, okay? And I'll leave it at that. Because when the USDA, the FDA, the NIH, all these governmental organizations, when they come out and say, well, meat eaters have terrible health, when they call you a meat eater, that means you're eating a giant Pizza Hut pizza with pepperoni on it. That makes you a meat eater. No, that makes you a grain eater, a low-quality dairy eater, a pesticide consumer, and a seed oil consumer, all of those at far higher numbers than the little bit of meat that's on top of the pie. Yeah? Right? I mean, it's just, yeah. 1 Million Pumpkins says vegans are the incels of gastronomy. I'm not going to pick on vegans. I'm just saying we need to push agriculture toward this integrated model, livestock and vegetation, because that's the way nature does things. We also need to increase urban and suburban production. Like I said, we're not all going to grow our own food. But what if most of us grew 10% of it? See, now, There's a lot of things in that. One, it takes pressure off the existing system, but two, it frees up more capital to buy higher quality product. If I can cut my grocery bill by 10% even, I have 10% more money if I'm willing to allocate it for food, to allocate for grass-fed beef instead of CAFO beef, just as one example. So we do need the backyard gardens and orchards. That's just a piece. That's all I'm saying is you can't only do it with that. We also need to be encouraging people. We've got people becoming homeowners left and right in America today. It's harder than it used to be, but it's still a primary goal. We have this whole group of people, millennials, right? And then we have like the oldest Gen Zs now even edging into like that age and space for home ownership. They all buy houses, and then they all want to go buy shit for their houses. And they all go out and buy like a live oak or some little lollipop tree and stick it in the front yard. Why can't that tree be an apple or a pecan or anything? A peach, a nectarine, whatever grows well in their area. Why can't those boxy looking shrubs be some sort of productive plant? Why can't we at least get to the point where we're planting the majority of the perennials on urban and suburban properties to things that are at least in some way productive? Even if it's not always food, we have food, we have fibers, we have medicines. There's lots of things we can grow. There's an entire market that could be created with artist charcoal from growing willow. And then that willow could also be coppiced or pollarded and made into feed for rabbits. And the stuff that's bigger than you would feed to the rabbits gets made into artist charcoal. And there could be a guy doing that right in the suburbs that doesn't own rabbits and doesn't draw anything. If we start seeing the opportunity to build markets where they don't yet exist. We also need to be planting productive species in public areas. This is something that I've said for a very long time as well. We have all these parks all over the place. We have all this money that goes into landscaping. You see people walking around in the middle of the day with leaf blowers, blowing leaves off the path, as though they're even a problem. What the hell are you blowing leaves? I saw this was a national park. It was in Tennessee. These two ass clowns paid money by the Park Service, had a golf cart, and they wired two leaf blowers to the front of it, and they're driving around in this noisy fucking thing. Well, I paid money to get in here. I'm looking for peace and serenity. They're driving around with two leaf blowers going to blow leaves off of a path in the fucking woods. This is the mindset that comes from government. That's why we've got to push them as far out of this as we can. We really do. But why are we spending all this money? We have these idiots that are being paid with tax dollars to do this shit, and we have no productive plants. When you walk through a park and you look, and on both sides of the path, there's this beautiful row of trees, and they're magnolias or something. Why can't they be pecans? Why can't they be pecans? Do you know what you would do for a local community and economy? I guarantee you take a park in the middle of a small town and you fill it with just pecan trees. Like there's other things you could be. All you do is like all the new trees that go in, everything gets irrigation is a pecan. You will have within 10 years pecan festivals. The whole community would come out, pick the pecans. They'll have a pecan queen. Like this is all that it takes to give people something to kind of be attracted to, and they will form community around it. How many people have been to places where they have things that you would never think of? Like there's some parts of the Northeast in the spring, they have leek festivals, wild leeks. It's basically a wild onion that grows in the forest before the canopy comes in for the year. They have entire festivals built on this. There's a black walnut festival near where the farm was we managed in West Virginia. They have a black walnut queen. They have all kinds of black walnut product because black walnuts just grow there on their own. We can replicate that. But we need to start turning over public spaces to public good, and more food for the public is a public good. And I know some of you are going to be like, Jack, you're supposed to be anarcho-libertarian. I am. but they're spending this money anyway. The amount of money that goes into parks around the country, state level, federal level, local level, is insane. It's hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars, and it produces nothing. It could produce something. It could produce something. And we need to have more carve-outs for like suburban and urban farms. I don't know, something like 2 acres and under, where you make things like just everything gets out of the way. Everything a traditional farm has to do, don't worry about it. Everybody's going to die. No, they're not. No, they're not. I can grow food in my garden right now, give it to my neighbor. Everything's legal. And you know what? Barbara doesn't die. I've given Barbara food. She doesn't die. I've given Dennis food. He doesn't die. Nobody's ever gotten sick or died because I gave him food out of my garden. This is ridiculous. On a small scale, and even if you're if you have a state where you can't get it complete hands off, at least push it back. Push it back to people under a certain size. You just get out of their way. In fact, instead of getting in their way, how about helping them? How about providing certain incentives for these small local farms? Because this is the size that can make the biggest difference. That's why there's so much opposition to it, right? You're not going to make a difference because you get 5,000 acres in the middle of nowhere and grow corn better than your neighbor. You're not going to change anything. I'm not saying you shouldn't do it. I am saying you probably should integrate some other things with it if you want to be financially viable at that scale. But you won't really, you will not be able to look out at your house at your 1,000 acres of corn, even though it's the best, the best organic corn known to man, and see a difference being made. But if you build a 1-acre farm in the middle of a town and you start providing food to local groceries and local restaurants, if you put a little cafe in the front of it, if people come by and buy direct, you'll change the town with 1 fucking acre. Which is why they hate small farms. They talk like they like small farms. They do not like small farms. Everything is designed around the 1970s mantra, go big or go home. Does that sound like an entity to you that likes small farms? Go big or go home? Jack, that was 40 odd years ago. Yeah, and the spirit still remains. If you're farming massive amounts of land, the government will throw money at you. You won't make any money, but you'll be enabled to do your job. The small farmer has been squeezed in every way known to man for a very, very long time. They squeezed out everybody. But you can make $100,000 in profit off an acre, well managed and well marketed. And we need to carve this out. I know one place, they employ over 20 full-time people. They don't even grow food. 4 acres, 20 full-time employees. They're an organic rose farm in New York. There is so much economic viability and opportunity here if we get out of the way of the small-scale producer. You don't think 2 acres is big, so you try to go ahead and try to manage 2 acres. As a farmer that's doing a mixed vegetable crop, for instance, not even get too complicated. Let's say 10 crops, and then those rotate through the season. So maybe it's really 20 crops, but certain things like I'm not going to grow this thing. Like I'm not going to grow broccoli during these 4 months, and I am going to grow broccoli during these 4 months. Go try to do it. Go see. How many people out there, you guys, you have relatively small gardens, and it wears your ass out on a weekend. There is a lot of production per acre when we get into these more intensively managed systems, especially if we do things like the integration of small livestock, like a 1-2 acre thing. We don't want to integrate cattle with that. But we could tractor rabbits and chickens in that system, or chickens and quail, or rabbits and quail. Very, very easily in those systems. Again, if we get local carve-outs to leave these people alone and let them see what's possible. Let them see what's possible. And again, the people that raise safety concerns, show me where it happened. Show me where isn't it not every time we hear about some food poisoning shit, it's always like some freaking jalapenos from Mexico that were fertilized with human waste have E. coli on them or something. Right? It's never Bill's farm down the road poisoned somebody. Bill doesn't want to poison it. Bill's probably eating his own food. Bill knows his customers. Bill's not throwing his shit on the back of a truck that's driving for 3 days before it gets to the border, that goes on another truck to a warehouse and goes out of that warehouse to Chicago. Bill's customers down the road. He doesn't want to poison his customer. It's personal to him. We need to get out of the way of these people. Next, we need to look at greenhouse and indoor growing more. I know this is another place that I differ with a lot of people in the regenerative space. They think any kind of inside plastic, hydroponics, aquaponics, lights, is all bad. It's again, people like that do not understand the scope of what we're trying to replace, let alone even just exist parallel to. Go back to what I said about those supermarkets. 47,000 supermarkets doing an average of $500,000 of sales a week. There is room for everything. And one of the things that we get when we go into greenhouse, indoor growing, hydroponics, aquaponics, various combinations of these, is we get extremely high yields per square foot. You know what I just said? What I just said about how much food you can produce from an acre, multiply it by about 5 when we get into these controlled growing situations. When we're doing, let's say, hydro or aquaponics, we're bringing the nutrients straight to the plant so we can plant more densely. Just as one example, they're really optimized for very profitable crops. And here's the thing about all profitable vegetative crops outside of like high-end medicinals and stuff like that, or like cannabis stuff, right? If you're talking food and you see high profit, it's quick turn. It's quick turn. It's fast. It's greens. It's microgreens, baby greens, and small greens. It's salad greens and mixed greens. Sells for more than ribeye by the pound. And these systems are perfect for it. They're perfect for it. Because you can grow up on tabletops, in troughs, whatever, and you can grow a lot. Huge yields per square foot. It expands production beyond what regional climates can produce. And it's hard for people to grasp how big some of these opportunities are. So, for instance, I know a guy that lives about 15 miles from me. He has a backyard little duck and chicken operation, sells live birds. That's pretty much all he does. And it doesn't mean that none of them get eaten. His number one customer that he makes the most money off of, and I say customer, I mean a demographic, not one person. His neighborhood has a ton of Laotian immigrants. And they buy male Drake Muscovies. And he sells a live male Drake Muscovy for about $40. And you're looking at a bird that's 7-8 months old. $40. Doesn't process it, doesn't do anything, sells it. Why? They want a big, cool, locally produced bird for big family meals. Now, how many other opportunities are out there like that? I have no idea. We haven't even begun to look for opportunities like that. And so he's able to sell all his drakes. And when I bought some Muscovies from him, he was like, I'm sorry, I have to charge you $45 for this drake. It's a big drake. I can get $45, $50 for it tomorrow if I let the people know that one's available. And I'm like, I need one to make babies, so I'll pay you for it. Right? So when we start looking at expanding our production beyond regional climates, we don't even know what we can discover yet. Whenever we do have an egg surplus of duck eggs, all my wife does is goes and get her nails done. She goes into the nail salon. She tells all the girls in there, and they're all Vietnamese, I have duck eggs in the cooler in the trunk. Does anybody want to buy any? They're $10 a dozen. And they immediately go into Asian haggle mode. We buy all. Yes, $10 a dozen. No, you give us a deal. Yes, give you a deal. $10 a dozen. And they end up giving up, and they buy every single egg we have. How many things like that are there if we could start growing things outside of our climate zone in our climate zone. One that is a huge deal is what's a plant called duck potato. It's a huge thing among Chinese. They eat it at Chinese New Year as a good luck thing. I don't even know how many things like that we could find that could be grown locally and sold with that local angle that normally you wouldn't be able to if we'll embrace this. There was a time when like my dream was to grow coffee and vanilla beans with a glass house locally here and sell to a local brewer for a vanilla coffee stout. I still think that's viable. The vanilla, though, that requires a level of intricacy and knowledge on the manual pollination that I would never come up with, but definitely could do the coffee. And that's like an extreme example. What about just extending the season 2 months? What does that do for you in the local market? And this is a way to get there. The other thing about these indoor growing situations, hoop houses, greenhouses, glass houses, whatever you want to call them, they can be directly attached to distribution channels. They can be directly attached to markets, to groceries, to restaurants. There are grocery stores, for instance, in New York City. They're huge stores. So the entire roof, which may be a half acre to an acre, is a glass house. They grow the produce on the roof. It goes down an elevator and gets sold in the store. Why can't we do that everywhere? Are the people that run New York City really smarter than the people that run, I don't know, Jacksonville, Florida? I don't think so. I don't think so. How is it that some of these most screwed up places get some of this right? And people that have that you know, they intellectually masturbate about how liberty oriented that their state is or whatever. And really, you can't do this. Then is it really a liberty oriented state? Why would you get in the way of that? Some places it's money. We're going to get to that in a second. Some places it's regulation. Some places it's a combination. There's risk aversion. There's all types of issues here. But if we can actually grow food directly tied to the distribution model, we've just flattened everything. Now we can make more money for the grower and it costs less to the consumer for a better product. Everybody wins. And this is something that we don't teach. We don't teach, and we probably really won't now since a certain somebody wrote a book called The Art of the Deal. But in a deal that's a legitimately good deal, everybody in the deal should feel like they got it exactly what they wanted out of the deal. There's no reason you can't have the farmer make more money, the retailer make more money, the consumer get a better product, and still have less dollars per ounce or pound come out of the consumer's pocket. If we're not moving the fucking food from California to Georgia, because Georgia can grow food just fine, we can take the bill to move the food from California to Georgia off the table. And indoor growing, hoop houses, etc., is a great way to do that. And the other thing we need to understand with this, and somebody here said something, and I'm betting that this person is exactly doing what I'm about to talk about next. Now, here, Victory Garden says, F yeah, man, hoop house and automated watering via raised IBCs and drip lines changes the game for small acreage. And that's an important thing, small acreage. Do you notice I didn't say put every square foot of grow area inside a greenhouse? Greenhouses are expensive. They have costs. They have construction complexities. They can be damaged, so they need to be in. Anything that could be damaged needs to be insured. We're going to get to that too in a minute. But if we take a 2-acre, farm in that local carve out, and we put a half acre under glass, we change everything, even though 75% of the land is still growing outside. 75% is still growing outside. In fact, in many instances, a relatively small greenhouse, forget measuring in acreage. Look at something that's like a high tunnel, that's like a 30-foot by 100-foot high tunnel. That's pretty big, but I mean, it's scratching the top of a thumbnail on acreage. It's not very big at all. The amount of food that can produce, the amount of extension, and the amount of benefit it can have to that producer. Because what can I do with that? Well, one, certain times of the year, I can actually cool in there with shade cloth, and I can grow local greens that would otherwise bolt. That would be one thing I can do with it. Yeah. But I can also start all my own plants in there that will be set out for my mixed vegetables. And they take up very little space. So what else can I do? Well, I can plant way more than I need. Now I can sell to customers and local nurseries well-started plants, because that's a huge market. When Home Depot is selling a tomato plant for $6, there's a market to sell them for $2. And they're very profitable at $2. What's a seed cost? You don't, but let's say you have a penny in the seed, a quarter in the dirt, and a quarter in the container. That's way higher than you would. That's 51 cents on $2. It's $1.49 profit per plant at $2. Selling under the retail market by what? 80% lower than the retail market? If you can't do that, you got some problems that are not just in your growing, it's in your marketing and your sales and your understanding of business. Again, we'll get to that too. But it's not all or nothing. And that's one of the problems I think where regenerative ag, permaculture people get their head up their ass when you start talking about things like hydro, indoors, glass houses, etc. They don't understand. You're not saying like, well, I want to get rid of all outdoor growing and grow everything in a factory inside a warehouse in New Jersey. Not what we're talking about here. Next, we need to really look hard at two places that are boring and mundane and no one ever really wants to talk about except for weird people like me: finance and insurance. You can't really, out of your own pocket, start a farm of any size today. You can start small farms, don't get me wrong, but when we're talking about mainstream agriculture, you're not doing it. In fact, even what you would think of, I know when I say 100 acres, you're like, oh my God, that's a huge piece of land. That's how most people would think. It is, but it's also not when we start talking about farms. Farms in America, 1,000, 2,000 acres is still pretty small. We have farms that are 5,000, 10,000, 40,000 acre farms. And you can't even begin, even if you had if you had the money to fund that out of pocket, it's a real estate purchase. You know what you call a person that uses their own money to buy real estate when they don't have to? Stupid and soon to be bankrupt. The whole system is skewed against using your own money in farming. If you want to make a profit without being able to deduct your expense, use your own money in farming when it comes to buying land and making material investments. You borrow the money, you end up writing almost all of it off as an expense. You spend it out of pocket, you have to amortize it and depreciate it over 30 years or more. And it leads to bankruptcy. So we have a financing need at any real scale. Anybody's going to buy real estate needs financing. But most farmers need, what most small business people need: some sort of a line of credit. They have ebbs and flows in their revenue. You don't harvest every day. Now, if you go back to my last segment and you have a glass house, maybe you're harvesting something every day. At least you have some cash flow. But most farms are going to go for periods with heavy cash flow, periods with moderate cash flow, and periods with no cash flow. So they need just bridge loans to make payroll. The financing system is not set up for these people. It's not set up for real farmers. It's set up for industrial farm management. That's what it's set up for. But there is some really cool things beginning to happen. One I just learned about, and it was what kind of gave me the last impetus to go ahead and do this episode. And I'm looking for the link right now because for some reason I closed it. But it's called Steward, STEWARD. And the website is gosteward.com, like being a steward of the land. And let me bring this up for you guys that are on the live stream right now. What this is kind of like Kickstarter for farms in a way, but not really. And what I mean by that is, a Kickstarter is like you pre-sell your shit. Like if you did it with a farm, like we're going to do 100 pigs. And if you back us at $500, you get a pig at the end of the season or something. And I don't even know that would be doable in a lot of situations. This is not that. This is financing. This is the farmer goes to steward and says, here's the project I want to do. This is what I need the money for. This is my business plan. This is how I plan to pay the money back. And then they look at it and they put it to their people, their financial backers. And you can get involved as a farmer that wants to borrow money, or you can get involved as an individual that wants to lend money. And from the interview I just listened to with John Kemp by the founder of this company, there's people that, like their funding that they put in for this project might be $100, might be $1,000, might be $50,000. Their interest rate is 8% with reasonable terms on repayment. And they only take a half point, which means the investors are making 7.5% on their money. So it's profitable, but they'll loan to people who otherwise wouldn't be able to get a loan. And I don't want to say too much about it. I'm actually going to try to get the founder of this company on air and do an interview because I think this is the type of thing, but we need to actually replicate this. We can't have one platform doing this because of a couple reasons. One, it will probably never be big enough to serve the full market. Two, if it got big enough to serve the market, it probably would no longer serve the market. It would become too centralized. And three, by being like the only player in this space, if the powers that be decide they want it gone, they'll crush it like a cockroach. And there'll be nothing they can do, no matter how right they are, no matter how legal they are. It won't matter. If the powers that be decide they want to get rid of something, and there's only one of it, they're going to get rid of it. But when you have 100 of them, good luck. Good luck, right? If they're going to crush you like a cockroach, you have to behave like a cockroach, which means breed your ass off, reproduce yourself, be self-replicating. 1 makes 2, 2 make 4, 4 make 8, 8 makes 16, 32, 64, 128, and so on and so on. And by the time you're at 128 entities like this, forget about it. It's impossible. It's the biggest game of whack-a-mole known to man. And so we need more systems like that. But there's another problem here. And as I've been doing research for these courses I'm building, I'm learning so much about the plight of the farmer. Because again, what I'm doing, I'm taking the most cutting edge things being done in farming for regenerative agriculture and permaculture and natural production. And I'm retooling it to be used by the backyard gardener who doesn't have a combine, who doesn't have an injection machine to inject with every seed a little pulse of compost extract or something like that. But as I'm learning things that, like, I guess I knew that, but it doesn't make any sense that we would do things this way. So let's say I do want to buy a farm, and it's not a big farm, 5 acres, 5-acre farm, mixed vegetables, and it's been a farm. It's an ag loan for an ag property. And I have some, I have some Schedule Fs I can turn in and say, hey, I did smaller farms, but I farmed before I know what I'm doing. And I go to buy that property. Well, the bank's going to look at it, and they're going to say that property has a financial value of X. And then if you put in X percent down, percent of X down, say 20%, we'll loan you the balance. Yeah. And what this does is it sets a limit on the price of that property, but it also sets a limit on what I can pay for the property, right? Okay. Here's the problem. You have 2 farms. They're across the street from each other. One has soil that's been managed in a way, it has an organic matter of 4%. And some of you I said that and your eyes went a little bug out of your head, like, wow, holy shit. You understand what I'm saying when I say 4% organic matter, right? It's got a high cation exchange, right? If you test it, there's not a micronutrient missing from it. Across the street, same size, 5 acres, same basic house. Let's say it was 2 brothers built houses 50 years ago. But the other brother doesn't give a shit, and he's been dumping 10, 10, 10 on his fields. and running a conventional farm, and his organic matter percentage is 0.25%. When you go to get a loan on the property, the loan underwriter is going to value those two properties equally. Now, some of you know what 4% organic matter in farm soil means. And you're like, what the hell? Now, I'm going to tell you there are places where these loans are still underwritten by local banks. They'll tell you that there aren't any, but there are some. And the loan underwriter fully knows and comprehends that the soil value of that 4% farm versus that 0.25% farm is high and gone away, separated. He'll look you in the eye. Local guy, runs a mixed vegetable farm as a hobby farm, knows what you're talking about. Kids are making a living farming the way you're talking about farming. Completely understands it and goes, I know, I'm sorry, there's nothing I can do. We do not value real estate based on what it actually is. This is a huge problem. And to me, we will never fix the banking system that we have to accommodate it. We need more programs like Steward for things like that. Personally, this is beyond food, by the way. I don't want to go too far off the rails with it, but this is not about food, this subject. When I moved down here from Arkansas and bought this place, there was a place I much preferred to have bought. It was $240,000. It was 7 acres, had the down payment, totally qualified for that mortgage, no problem. Couldn't do it. Couldn't do it. If I bought that place, my workshops would be bigger and better. I'd probably have 3 to 4 acres of water and ponds on the property, black clay soil down in Mansfield. I mean, you just dig a hole and pack it down, you got a pond. The kitchen in this place, if you built just the kitchen, it's probably a $70,000 kitchen. Why was it for sale for $240,000? Was the foundation cracked or something? Nope. Geodesic dome. It was a dome house. It was almost 5,000 square foot concrete dome structure. Would not appraise so that we could buy it. Now, the city of Mansfield had no problem saying it was worth a hell of a lot more and taxing the people on it as though it was a hell of a lot more. They built it themselves, and when they went to sell it, they had marked it down as low as they could. You would have needed a 25% down payment to buy that house to get a mortgage against it, and I wasn't going to do it. This is what I'm saying. We are not valuing property based on the value of the property. We're using a centralized formulaic system, and if the house isn't square, bricks and sticks, or at least doesn't look like it, we don't value property proportionately. So now when we're looking at going into a business, if I'm a farmer and I'm buying a 5-acre farm, and the one farm has 4% organic matter and the other farm has 2%, a quarter of a point, it's going to take me 20 years of good management practices probably to get that shitty farm up to where this one is. What's that 20 years worth to me? Am I willing to pay some portion of it out of pocket up front to buy down the timeline and have faster production? But I can't even borrow money based on the actual value of the property. That's how insane our system is. And that's why I said this problem is so much bigger than you've been led to believe. We need to value farms higher and real estate higher, basically, when they have good track records. What the lending officer will say, well, just because Bill made a good living on this place doesn't mean that Tom's going to. But if Bill's land has outproduced per acre all the farms around him, the land's worth more money. I mean, that's not hard to figure out. That's not hard to figure out when they have better soils. And again, we need to be replicating these programs like Steward. And then there's another thing that, like, if you don't really dig into the farmer's plight, you'll never understand stupid shit like this. Farmers, especially large-scale broad acreage farmers, are able to buy something called crop insurance. In fact, they're required to in order to get a lot of the different things that they get from the government. They also buy the crop insurance. Well, the crop insurance is all centralized. And again, we're back to central planners, people with freaking pocket protectors and propeller hats on that think they're smarter than farmers. The same person, or I should say the same type of person who is willing to tell you and your doctor that you don't need an MRI scan of your back because you haven't been in pain for 6 weeks, is the same type of person who is determining when you have to plant your soybeans in Kansas this year. So it's what we call a planting window. But there are farmers who have experimented with this at personal risk and, let's say, planted their corn later instead of earlier than their planting window with their crop insurance. But because that corn went straight into warmer soil, and we're talking like a week or two here, or maybe it was that the ground was really too wet and too soft to properly plant, went in the window, so they waited a little bit longer. But they don't qualify for crop insurance now. Because these people have a calendar and it says in Kansas you plant between this day and that day or you don't get insurance. Well, there's no hard, fast data behind that decision. It's just based on when everybody at the feed store says they've always done it and looking at some historical records, if you're lucky, and saying this is generally when things are planted and we get a good... Well, that's all relative. The farmer is the one who needs to be looking at their land and saying, this year, I need to plant this crop at this time. I think we need, just like we have private issuance lending, we probably need to get into some kind of a business that has some form of insurance. You know, and maybe it's not as good as the insurance as far as covering everything, but some sort of loss mitigation insurance policies that recognize that farmers know more than insurance agents do. I'm just saying, like, how many of you ever even knew that was a thing? That there was a thing called crop insurance, and that somebody, just like the person that oversees your PPO and denies your ability to get treatment your doctor says you need, will tell a farmer, no, you can't insure your crop if you wait 2 more days to plant. And that farmer's now out miring his fucking planter in mud because it's too wet, but he's got a plant. See, none of this makes any sense. And it all goes back to the centralized, central planning ideal. That's where all of this really comes from. That's where all these problems come from. Then we need education of consumers and producers, right? I mean, we really do need to work more on education on both sides. One is we need to move consumers away from grain-based diets and seed oils. I'm not going carnivore. I'm not even going keto here. But I'm telling you, you were not meant to eat food that tries to kill you. Is it that simple to understand? Go eat wheat. I dare you. Don't go get bread that was made into bread for you by somebody else. Go find a wheat field. Go out in the wheat field and pull the grain heads off, stick them in your mouth, and try to eat it. Don't actually do that if you're one of God's special children. You will literally choke to death and die. It will lodge in your throat. All the little hairs and the husk of the grain will lodge in your throat. You will choke to death. You're not meant to eat wheat because you can't. It has to go through an industrial process in order to eat it. You're not meant to eat the oil from rapeseed. They call it canola. You're not meant to eat that. If you take the plant and just squeeze the oil out and try to eat it the way it comes out of the plant, it will make you sick. It'll kill you. You'll never swallow it. It's disgusting. It's an industrial lubricant. And we are growing so much of this shit at the expense of health of people. So we need to move people away from grain-based diets and seed oils, not just because it's a health problem, which it is, but so there's more opportunity for farmers, not less. We need more farmers growing more diverse crops in our local areas. And we can't do it by expanding grain production. Can't be done. It's not the way it works. You don't farm grain at small scale efficiently for a commercial operation. You don't. So we need to move people away from that. We need to make eating healthy cool. However that gets done. I'm not the one that can do all this stuff. I just come up with like a master plan, right? But we need to make it like cool to be healthy. Like right now, it's actually cool to not be healthy. Like everything being pushed by government, NGOs, etc., is about body positivity and you can be healthy at any size. In a word, bullshit. Right? You cannot be healthy at any size. I am sorry. That is not a thing. When you are so fat that you have what looks like a gut over your genitals, you are not healthy. If you stick your elbow in the air and you can stick the tip of your finger into your elbow at the point to where the top joint of your finger disappears, you are not healthy. Bluntly, if you can stand up without sucking your gut in, stand straight like a soldier, look straight down by putting your chin to your chest without leaning your body over, and you can't see your feet, you are not healthy. Okay? I spent a lot of my life not being healthy. I'm not putting you down for it. I'm just telling you the truth. And we are going out of our way as a society to convince people that being healthy is not important. Just move more and eat less and take your medicine. Live in your pod, eat the bugs, go vegetarian and everything will be okay. Vegan's even better. No. You know what healthy is? Healthy is when you have good muscle tone. Healthy is when men still have testosterone in their body in their 50s. And they should still have testosterone in their bodies in their 90s. We have people now that are on testosterone therapy in their 20s. We have made being sick cool. We need to make being healthy cool. Lifting weights, working out, knowing where your food comes, knowing your farmer. All these things need to be made cool, or whatever new word they have for cool. I'm old, so that's the word I still use. Been around long enough. I think I can keep using it for a while anyway. We need to get gardens into schools and churches. And I know there's a lot of this already, but I have a different reason for it. And the word I'm going to give you is a word that's not going to make sense at first. Failure. More people need to experience trying to grow food and failing. If we're going to command a higher price for the farmer has to be respected for the value they provide. Now, how many people that have never grown a basil plant have a dream? One day, I'm going to get some friends together. We're going to make a community and we're going to grow all our own food. They've never grown any food. So why do they have that fantasy? I want you to think about the real reason they have that fantasy. What do they believe that's not true? And I'm telling you, especially in the Bitcoin space, all these big-time Bitcoin influencers, guys that got in early, they have a bunch of money now. They're connected with people that have a bunch of money. They're the same story, man. Me and some friends, man, because we know what's coming. Right? They always tell you this like they think you're going to be impressed because I'm the survival guy, right? We know what's coming. I've got this friend, man. He's a Navy SEAL. He's going to teach us how to set up all our guns. And I'm going to bring some other people in, and we're going to have a ranch, man. And we're all going to have gardens, and we're going to grow all our own food. And I'm just thinking, you're going to lose a bunch of money, and you're going to buy your food from the grocery store, or you're going to fucking starve. You have no idea what you're doing. None. How long does it take? You plant a tomato plant. It looks really good. Stalk's bigger around your thumb. It's all coming up. All the bottom leaves start to turn brown, and the blight just goes up and destroys your whole plant. You get one fucking tomato. You come out, your pepper plant looks all beautiful. You come back out. You don't know what a tobacco worm is, but it knows what you are, and you come back and your pepper plants are all eating this shit. You go out and you get your garden all set up, and you have your chickens, and your chickens find your garden and tear everything out. Everything looks good this year. You learn from your failures. It's April. Man, I'm going to have the best year ever. And then you get bwant, 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 boop on your TV. The National Weather Service has issued a warning for your area. Please take cover now. And the swirling clouds of death don't come. But like happened here to me one year, you get shotgun pellet hail. I mean, the one year we got it, you know, when you go to like a convenience store and they have the little ice cubes, little bitty beads, you know, they're about the size of like a small marble. Man, we had 4 inches of it stacked up like snow that year. It destroyed every plant I had in my garden because it looked like somebody went out there with an airsoft gun on full auto and 100,000 rounds and just shot everything, which is basically what happened. Probably worse because the little pellets were bigger than an airsoft pellet. Like, do you know what happens when you experience that? All of a sudden you go, fuck, this shit's hard. The reason people don't want to pay a premium for food is they are under a complete misconception about what it takes to grow food. They don't respect the effort, the time, and the knowledge and the level that it takes to grow that food. We have become conditioned to believe that when we go buy a pepper in July for 99 cents at the grocery store, that farmer made 98 cents. The farmer made nothing on that pepper directly. Nothing. That pepper cost 99 cents because you paid for it through your taxes last year and it went out as a subsidy this year. It's grown in an industrial environment. It's sprayed with poisons. And, you know, when you talk about eating good quality food with all this bullshit that we have now with the wokies, right? You know, they say eating organic and high quality, that's a privilege. That's a privilege. It's a privilege for rich people. You know, it's a privilege. And I got this from Molly Engelhart. A privilege is being able to eat super cheap food that was grown thousands of miles away from you, and the people who grew it for you fucking poisoned themselves to grow you your food so you could eat it cheap. You want to look at cancer rates that'll blow your mind. Look at the cancer rates among agricultural workers. They're insane. That's the privilege. You being able to buy food for next to nothing because it was completely put out by an industrialized process that poisons the earth and people. That's a privilege for you. Paying somebody what they're worth for what they produce is not privilege. It's market. It's a market. And all it takes for you to start having an appreciation for the people that grow your food is failure. You think it's so easy? Go do it. All the people that talk like this, they never grow anything. You know, I never see the person with like the badass, kick-ass backyard garden be like, I'm going to get a bunch of my friends together. We're going to grow all our own food because they know it's bullshit. You know those people? I actually have 1 Million Pumpkins says the Molly interview is powerful. I wonder if he means the one with John Kempf that John just dropped. It was pretty powerful. I met her in Bastrop. I had no idea who she was. For those that don't know her, she was a very well-known, like, borderline famous vegan chef with multiple restaurants in LA. And she's now all in regenerative ag, eat the meat, you know, like she's she went from left-wing vegan to state-hating libertarian. And what did it more than anything else was COVID. There's some other things along the way. But she's an amazing person. I am going to get her on the air. I just didn't want to bother her. She's kind of going through her fire start of fame right now, and being asked by everybody to be interviewed. So I'll give her some time because I really want to get deeper into her story than just that service level stuff that I was just talking about. But yeah, once you start having food failure as a grower, you'll start to understand, and you'll start realizing that the real easy way to produce food is with animals. Animals eat shit that doesn't get destroyed by pests. You know, cows eat grass. Look out your window. I bet you could see some grass right now unless you live some weird place, right? Cows eat grass. There's grass. Cow eats the grass. Even like when animals we have to bring feed in for, it is way easier to grow eggs and chickens here than it is to grow grapes. And Aaron's asking who interviewed her. Lots of people, Aaron, but John Kempf is the one that I think we're talking about right now. Regenerative Agriculture Podcast. Yeah. So I want us to have more and more people growing their own food so that they can learn what failure looks like and have more respect for the people that are actually good at producing food. And on that, we need to be conveying the value of real food versus chemical food and educate about total cost. So when you go buy that $1 pepper, at the grocery store versus, let's say, one for $2 from the farmer's market. Well, you'd say the one from the farmer's market costs twice as much. Yet really, how much tax money was used to bring down the price of the one at Albertson's grocery store? Okay. How many chemicals are on that pepper? If you sent that to a laboratory and said, what am I eating? How many toxins have you ingested? Okay, so then what is the cost to your health long term? That should get factored in. So what's the total cost of production, not just the one you paid today, but the one you paid for the past year leading up to that purchase and taxes? What is the cost to the earth with all the toxins, the what I call the cocktail of the sides? And what does side mean? What is it when you put side on the end of something? To kill. What is a homicide? The killing of a human being is a homicide, right? A homicide, right? So you say pesticide, a substance that kills pests. And how do pesticides generally work? They attack the nervous system. You really think it's okay to eat something that you sprayed with a chemical agent that attacks the nervous system? You don't have a cost there? You see what I'm saying? Now, the other side is, and what is the cost for the nutrients going into your body? Which pepper do you think gives you more nutrient? The one grown in a 0.25% organic matter farm, which, by the way, that is the official average number for commercial farms in America. I didn't just pull that number out of my ass, right? That was sprayed with toxins. That was sprayed with not just pesticides, but herbicides as well. That was fertilized with full-on commercial chemical fertilizer. Oh, and what is the nutrient value of the pepper grown down the road from where you live in 4% organic matter soil that uses almost no fertilizer, including organic, because the system is so finely tuned by the farmer who's become excellent at his craft that most of what that plant needs, it's able to get from a little bit of compost and biological activity in the soil. That was never sprayed with anything remotely toxic to human beings, that was picked and delivered to you within 24 hours of it being picked. Which one has more value? From a straight up nutrient standpoint, what is the value of what's going in your body? You're paying for food. You're not buying the pepper because it's red. You're buying it for how it tastes and for the calories and the nutrient it puts in your body. We need to be educating people about this because people tend to actually pay more for better products if they can afford it. By the way, we could drive the cost down over time as well, because the less input means I can sell for less and make more. And we need to be teaching farmers about that mindset too. We'll get to that. We need to be building local and regional economies around food production. Part of that, like I said, is convincing local governments to form these carve-outs, to create a protective bubble around this and to start valuing it. We also need people just to be motivated and involved. I think one of the problems is, people want to do this, and then as soon as they try, like I said earlier, there just isn't anything there. They can't find the supply, right? So, yeah, I'm going to go to the farmer's market. Then I go down to the farmer's market. There's a guy sharpening knives. There's a bunch of booths of people selling peppers and tomatoes, which I grow myself. One guy with some microgreens, he's kind of cool, and not much else. Most farmers markets are, and it's a combination of states and local governments and their regulations again. And there's also you simple-minded retards that run farmers markets that limit and gild out more people. Well, we already have somebody that does that, so we don't need another. Yes, you do. Farmers market should be open to every Tom, Dick, Harry, and Harriet. I'm fine with things like you actually have to be bringing local food, things like that. Like some percentage has to be produced by you, not necessarily like the guy down the street that co-ops with you or whatever. But my God, let me tell you something. When you go to a farmer's market and you stand at the entrance and you can see the end, you're already put off. This is just how the consumer mind works. The more food that's there, the more. I don't care how much of it's the same. When I have a lot of people to talk to, when I have a lot of people to engage with, what's going to happen is me and Dark Horse are going to go to the same freaking farmer's market. There's going to be two people selling the same item. I'm going to talk to one and be like, this guy's a dick. I don't like him. I'm going to go talk to the other guy. I'm going to buy his shit. Dark Horse is going to talk to the guy I liked and be like, this guy's a dick. He's going to go buy from the guy I thought was a dick. Let markets market. This nonsense I see in farmers markets of intentionally keeping the number of vendors down, you're doing it wrong, morons. You're doing it wrong. Somebody cut this out. Anybody that knows somebody that runs a farmer's market, send them this little segment. You're doing it wrong. You're doing it wrong. You have to follow the model that department stores do with women's clothing. Because this is the kind of shopper you're dealing with, right? They want choice. They want variety. That's why they came somewhere else. That's why they didn't go to Publix or Albertsons. You go to I don't know, a Dillard's. I don't know who's in business still in the department store. But you go to, let's say, Dillard's or Foley's or I don't know, Sears if they still exist. I don't think they do. And you go down to the bottom floor. You got tools, you got furniture, you got jewelry, you got perfume, you got cologne, you got pool tables, you got sporting goods, right? You got bicycles and men's clothing. Yeah? You go to the second floor. What do you have? Women's clothing. Why? Because if you give women in a department store the size that men have for their space, most stores anyway, and put only shit in there they're going to buy, the average, not all, but the average woman's going to walk in and go, there's nothing here, and leave. Okay? That's what's going to happen. But they walk in and the whole floor is closed. 80% of them are garbage they'll never buy. Doesn't matter. That gets them shopping, and then they buy more. You open up one restaurant on the side of the highway, there's almost no one goes to it. You open 10 restaurants in a cluster, all 10 parking lots are jammed every Friday night. You're doing it wrong. You need more vendors at these things. You need as many as you can get. Anybody willing to buy a table gets a table. Again, I get not letting people go down to Publix and buying a bunch of commercial grocery and sell. I get that. Locally produced, value add, whatever you want to do, fine. But don't be gilding out producers. You idiots. Okay, I'm going to get off that soapbox. But God, you're stupid. Stop doing it, right? We have, it's so hard to set up a farmer's market in Texas. It's one of the most over-regulated farmer's market states in the country. For all our talk of being free and liberty and whatever. We're just stupid about it. By the way, Texas is a shitty state from a governmental standpoint for food. It's one of the worst in the country. It really is. But then somebody gets a farmer's market established. First thing they do, they limit it to 18 tables. No one gives a shit. Okay, really, I'm going to let go now. I'm sorry. Oh, you're stupid. You don't know anything about marketing. Okay, I'm really going to let go now. But you know nothing about marketing if you want to do that. So we need those regional, local markets. We also need to start developing more regionally adapted and open source seed and plant tree varieties. The idea that a farmer in Texas is going to source seed from a company in New England who gets its seed from Michigan is kind of stupid. It really is. Now, I think long-term, every farmer of consequence should be striving to produce all or most of their own seed. That's why I want these seeds to be open source, open pollinated type seeds. So even if Bill initially gets his seed from Jim, who's, 50 miles away and has his seed production locally, eventually Jim should be saving and producing his own seed, because everything just works better as we develop land race seeds versus just regionally adapted. But why don't we start with regionally adapted and move to land race? And if you build the right growth market, that seed producer is going to have plenty of business. He's going to have plenty of business. And if he begins to have if it's a place where Cubanelle peppers do really well, and they sell really well and lots of growers grow them. Maybe he'll have a boom cycle of Cubanelle pepper seeds, and maybe that'll wane, and maybe he'll start producing less and he'll produce something else. He'll go out and discover another variety and begin developing that and sell that into his customer base. If markets are not evolving, they're dying, right? You can't have a market grow without evolution within the market. It's just a rule of marketing that so many people fail to learn. We need as much general financial and business management education as we can get as we have ag education. Like most farmers, their biggest problem is not they can't grow food. They have no idea how to market and sell their product. Like one of the biggest problems I have, and this is not just farmers, this is like, handymen. I have a guy that does tree cutting work that I've had to do some work here and all. And like you say, hey, I want you to do this thing for me. And the first thing they want to do when they come back to you with a price, instead of giving you the price, is start telling you a story. Right? And I don't mean a marketing story. You don't need to market to me. I already asked you for a price. That's a buying question. You know what I need? I need a fucking number. I need a number. Do you know why they don't just give you the number? They're afraid the number's too high. You're going to give me the number, I'm going to tell you to go get screwed. It could happen. Give me the number. Give me the number. Because half the time, you're going to give a person a number, and they're going to go, okay, here, where do I sign? Or can you do it Wednesday? Here's your deposit. Just give the person the number. They don't give the number because they think the number's too high. They think you're going to be upset. They think you're not going to want to pay for it. Set your price. If you're totally comfortable with your price, raise it until you feel at least a little bit uncomfortable, and then put your price out there. I'm talking to farmers right now and every other small business person on the planet. First piece of advice I gave Nicole Sauce with her business, Holler Roast Coffee, was raise your price. Nicole said that every time I give her advice, it's 3 to 5 words. That's it. Because that's all it takes. We have overcomplicated everything. Farmers need to learn how to build markets and how to do customer service and customer retention and follow-up marketing, right? If you run a business in 2024 and you do not have an email list, you are wrong, especially if you're a farmer. Because if you're a farmer, all of a sudden 1 year, you didn't expect it. You get like a huge glut of something, you hit your list. Our cherry tomatoes went insane this year. Yes, the same ones you were paying more for last year, this year you'll pay less. Why? Because we have an abundance of them. Get it now, right? Like something, like there is this mindset that if you have it, you either cure it or do not go into business, and farming is a business. And that is that selling is somehow like a negative or a bad thing or a sleazy thing. To actually tell people how great what you have is wrong. And I can't get into the psychology that goes into our brains as children that causes this today. That's a show. I could do another show just on that. Maybe we will. That's something we haven't talked about for a long time. But it's a thing. All I can tell you today is you got to get over it. Do not apologize for asking a fair price for your work, no matter what it is. One of the things I heard John Kemp say on his podcast that I've referenced with Molly, I don't think it was with her, that interview, though. It was with, I don't think it was with the Stewart guy either. It was somebody else. Oh, it was a guy that built a processing facility for chickens so he could process his own birds, right? But what John said to him is he said, years ago, I was speaking at an event, and I said to this group of farmers, if you look around and you start talking to each other, and you ask all the people in this room how long they've been doing what they're doing, how much work they put in, and how much dedication they've put in over the years, if you'd done that with anything else, you'd be 10 times wealthier than you are today. And he said, all those people started looking at each other. Like, wait a minute, he's right. Like, think of any other profession, especially an entrepreneurial profession, that you put the time, money, and effort into that farmers put into what they do. How wealthy would you be? And then you turn around and you're afraid of your price. You accept what the market gives you. You sell your cattle to the sale barn. You sell your tomatoes to Del Monte, right? No, sell your tomatoes to Karen and Ken. They'll pay you better. You like the stuff that gets sold into the commodity market, that should be shit You've done everything you can. You can't get rid of it any other way. And you'd probably still make more money selling it to somebody that wanted it for their damn livestock. The way the current system works, I can only get so deep into today. Again, we're over an hour and a half, and I'm still got a long way to go. But the way the current system works today is the distribution channel owns the farmer. If you look at chickens, for instance, they tell you how many chickens you're going to put in your chicken house. They loan you the money to buy the base chickens. They loan you the money to buy the chicken house. But they also tell you when you're going to pay it, how much you're going to pay for it. And if you don't do what they say, they will cut you off. They will just cut you off and say, well, then we're not going to work with you. It is very analogous to a feudal lord and a serf. You think of farmers as being like fiercely independent and all, but they've had that destroyed in their lives. And it's also, you can buy chicken for 69 cents a pound for drumsticks. That's why. You go out and raise a chicken and see if you don't think that drumstick's worth more than 69 cents a pound. We have been convinced these artificially low prices make sense. They do not. And they are not the cost. You got somebody out there thinks they're getting a deal on food and they're spending $20,000 a year on fucking Ozempic. And they're also on metformin and whatever that thing is that the fat lady sings about lowering her A1C with, Jardians, right? They're on 3 drugs, 30 grand a year. They're type 2 diabetic, but they're getting a good deal on their chicken. Bullshit. Bullshit. So we need to educate finance and business into our farmers beyond how do I finance this $750,000 combine. I'm not even talking about those farmers at this point. I'm talking about all the young upstarts that want to farm a couple acres, 5 acres, 3 acres, 1. They don't have, most of these people have no idea how to market, no idea how to sell, no idea how to set price, no idea how to manage finance. Growing, you will figure out. But if you grow a whole bunch of food and it rots in the field, you just lost money. You'd have been better off doing nothing. Next, we need to educate our farmers and ranchers to the economics of regenerative processes. They believe that it costs more to operate this way. It does not. It costs less. It may cost more up front in some ways. What it really is, let's look at it. I find that metaphors and analogies help people grasp things that are hard to grasp otherwise. Let's say that you were going to go to school, and one school is $20,000 a year for 4 years. So that's $80,000. And it's going to be 4 years of your life as a full-time student, meaning maybe you can have a part-time job or something, but you're not going to work full-time and do it. So you're going to be in a negative cash flow situation for 4 years. But through the magic of government lending, you fill out this piece of paper, your mama signs it and says she doesn't make that much money, and then they come out and they just give you $20,000 a year for 4 years. And you don't pay any of it back until after you get out of school for 6 months to get your first job. Now you can start paying it back. What's the cost of that loan? And it's somewhere around $350,000 to $400,000 if you don't miss any payments but make the minimum ones. Okay. Now, I'm sitting over here, and I got Jack's Academy. And Jack's Academy is $20,000 for 1 year. And you absolutely can get a job making good money at the end of that year. The catch is the government won't give you the money and tell you can pay it back when you get around to it in the future. The government won't say, hey, your first payment is going to be $74 and it's going to be 4.5 years from now. You actually have to come up with the money. Which one costs more? Well, the first one costs more. It's almost $400,000. It's $80,000 if you paid it back the day you graduated with no interest, which I bet you can't do. I bet you can't pay it off that early and get that much of a discount. I bet you're still going to pay 4 years of interest on it. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong. But it's clear the case. The $80,000 in 4 years of your life costs less than $20,000 in one. Right? But you can get the financing like that for the 80. Who's going to give you the 20? A lot of stuff when you move into the regen ag market. Now, there are government programs. There are subsidies. There are things you can do like cover cropping. You can get more money for the seed than the seed cost to cover crop. Everybody should be doing it. But people don't know. Again, we need to educate farmers and ranchers to the economics, including plugging into the system they're comfortable with. You want to put swales on your property? Well, go ahead. Get yourself a machine and get to work. Good luck. How'd you like to get paid to put swales on your property? Well, if you're a farmer or a rancher and you call the swales USDA Code 600 agricultural terraces, the government, knowing there's a topsoil problem, will pay you to install the terraces more than it costs to install them. So both from a standpoint of, yes, you're going to have to come out of pocket on this, and from a standpoint of, but the existing system will help you with some of it, we need to educate farmers to this. Because what we've really lost by industrializing this process is the concept of the family farm. There was a time not so long ago in America where a farmer would literally kill himself to keep his farm. And the reason he would do it is he didn't look at the farm as the way he made his living as much as he looked at it as legacy to hand to his children. Especially if that farm had been in the family already 3, 4, or 5 generations. He's looking at his grandson going, there has to be a place for Timmy one day. Timmy needs to be able, like, farmers don't even think that way anymore. Farmers literally send their kids to college to go do anything but farming. If they do come home, they come home as an agronomist, or they sell for the seed company or the chemical company, or they sell vaccinations to veterinarians or some shit. If they go back to their rural communities at all, most of them don't even go back. The farmers literally get to the point where they're like, I should just do everything I can with this and sell it off to some other sucker. They don't even want it anymore. Like, the one thing I do have is a bunch of land, and I can get money for it, enough money not to ever work again. And that's what happened. That's how our farms have gone from 40 acres to 40,000 acres. Person after person after person calling it quits and giving in. Because they don't have real ownership in their property, because they're controlled by the government subsidies, the chem ag, the financing from John Deere, all the crop insurance, all of it together equals control. And when other people control you, you're screwed. You don't have freedom. You don't have autonomy. So when we move into the regenerative practices, it might be a step back, but the step forward is a giant leap, to quantify, or to borrow from a phrase. Now, land access is another huge issue, right? I'm going to buy a bunch of land and start a farm. Then you go price land, and then all of a sudden they're all talking about opening up a T-shirt kiosk or something because land is expensive. Well, number one, things like Steward that we talked about earlier, they can help by providing alternative financing. There's only so much of that money available. And what about first-timers? Let's say that I sign up for Steward, and I'm going to go look at what it takes, and I probably will. A proposal comes across. Roger T here is going to start a farm. He wants $150,000 to start a farm. He has absolutely no experience in agriculture whatsoever, and he wants to buy land in a place where there are no farms. I got to know more, but I'm leaning toward no. I'm not putting my money into that pool, right? People need to get track records so that they qualify for better terms in financing. So they need lower cost entry points. So one of the things I think that would be a really good business model is something along the lines of farm percolators. There are people with money. Well, what if you could buy enough land that you could break it into, let's say, quarter acre paddock sizes and lease that to your would-be farmers. And when they want more, assuming there's another plot available, they just can lease more. And one way or another, we need to teach farmers about the leased land model. The most successful farmers I know lease the majority of their land. Joel Salatin farms thousands of acres. He doesn't own anywhere near what he farms. All his infrastructure is portable. By the way, all his product is chickens and pigs and cows. Right? If you got to grow turnips, you got to put roots down for real. If I'm farming chickens and pigs and cows, all my infrastructure is portable. Convoy of pickup trucks, and I just move my farm. My farm is a brand on a corporate filing that I do business as. It's not the land when I'm doing livestock. It's one of the very powerful things about it. One of the most successful farmers I know, Greg Judy. He only owned like 20 acres or something until very recently when one of his long-term people he was leasing from put him in his will and gave him his land when he passed away. Greg Judy, I think, is 2,500 acres or something like that is what he's ranching. And he owns like 100 and some odd acres. And like I said, for most of his life, he's owned 20-ish. We need to educate this into prospective farmers. See, here's the problem that we have. We have people whose minds are just mentally fucked up. They can't understand what it takes to capitalize on opportunity long term. They want everything instantly gratified now. And it's not their fault. They've been conditioned this way. I remember back when a bunch of this woke bullshit came into the farming space and people were publishing articles about things like Joel Salatin farms racist. I don't think there's a way to, unless you're using slaves, I don't think there's a way to farm racist. That's asinine. But one of the discussions that got kicked up, I remember this girl said her dream was to own a farm and she can't get money. And I'm like, go get a job working on a farm and learn the business. And she goes, oh, that's just great. Working for a white man on his farm. This was a white woman. Karen as they get. I just gave up. I'm like, I'm not going to talk to this person anymore. But that mindset, like how screwed up is that mindset? I tell most people when they want to get into any business, do you have experience in this business? If the answer is no, go get a job. Go get a job for a couple of reasons. One, learn the business, but two, determine if you actually like it. Trust me, if you don't like doing a job when somebody else is taking all the risk and you take a paycheck home every week, you ain't going to like it when you're taking all the risk and some weeks you don't have a paycheck. So go see if you like it. But this mindset, like, I have to own it. I have to, like, see, this is the thing. Rich people want to control things. Poor people want to own things. Let me say that again. Rich people want to control things. Poor people want to own things. Pride of ownership. Now, I'm not saying ownership in of itself is bad, and it's not a goal to move toward at some point. But if you want to start farming, and you go out and you buy yourself, let's say, 4 acres, and you start pasturing chickens on it, you will never pay for that property with just chickens. You won't make your mortgage payments for the first quarter of the first year off your year of revenue. 90% of the time, anyway. It's not going to work out that way. But what you can do is you can go lease property very inexpensively and learn your trade and your craft and build your brand. And if you want like a template for that, the book to get is Pastured Poultry Profits by Joel Salatin. There's basically a small number of chickens and give them all away on the first run. That builds your market base. And you don't need that much land to do it. But we need to educate farmers to the leased land model. Because the most successful farmers, at least it's part of what they do. Even if they own land, they're still leasing land to expand land, right? And it's just a lower expensive way to do it. Again, I think we need farm percolators. We need more spin farming. And spin farming is where somebody farms in your own backyard. And I think that we need to start maybe like everybody, I mentioned it earlier, schools, churches and stuff. Now, schools would be its own unique problem. Schools are public property, even though they're really not. They call them that. They're paid for with public dollars. They have all kinds of regulations to go with them. Generally, churches can do anything that they want. So all these churches decide, and I know several of them around here, well, we're going to have us a community garden. And everybody comes out after Sunday school and builds the 4x8 raised beds and puts a little picket fence around them and makes them all look pretty. And then a year later, they're all full of weeds because nobody that actually goes to that church that has the patronage with the kind of people that are going to do that kind of work for community garden needs the community garden to be able to garden. Almost nobody lives walking distance from the church. Everybody gets in the car and drives out there on Sunday. So who's going to manage the garden? And the answer is most of the time, nobody. I've seen dozens of them and 2 or 3 that are actually operational. You know who would take care of that space? A farmer that leased the land from the church. That's who. That's who. If the church has a food bank and people donate money, then why can't the church lease to the farmer who sells all his surplus into their food bank? Why not? How many big pieces of land are owned by landowners who are never going to farm it, and all they're doing now is paying for lawn care service? How much leased land could there be in little quarter-acre, half-acre farms? Especially if we developed a template that you could take to a company or a church and say, this is what this looks like. Who's going to, I don't know. I don't know who's going to lease it from you. This is what this looks like. This is how you put it out. You might be surprised, though. If you have a church with 1,000 members and the pastor stands up and says, you know, we have 7 acres of land here, and we're interested in breaking off a half acre of it for a community farm, not a community garden. And we're looking for a farmer that wants to lease this property at our cost to help offset costs. Somebody might know somebody that wants to do that. And you might not have any trouble with that farmer selling 100% of their crops because they might just sell them after Sunday service every weekend. You don't need a farmer's market. The farmer's right there. The farm's right there. There's the food. Go buy it. And now you've got a closed system, right? And everybody benefits. The church is offsetting its cost. Don't give me, if you start talking about nonprofit status in that model, you don't know anything about nonprofit status, okay? There's nothing that prevents this from happening, okay? Nothing. This can be done. You need to talk to your CPA and your tax attorney. And by the way, all this shit you need to be talking to your CPA and your tax attorney about when I get into structures and things like that. I think there's a place for things like private member associations and stuff like that. But what I see in this space, especially the ag, the community space, all this, these people, every event I go to, people are asking questions. Well, I want to start a private membership association. No, you don't. They look at you like a deer in the headlights. What? No, you don't. You don't know that. Have you ever done the business that you're talking about doing? Well, no. Then why are you leading off with a structure instead of the business? What you want is a business that does these things, and then you need to take that business model once you know what it is, and you don't yet, and you need to go to a CPA and a tax attorney and say, how do I structure this? Because it might be a hybrid model with 3 entities, right? One is a holding entity that holds 2 others. It might not be. It might be very straightforward. There might be no better. It might be a co-op with a PMA inside of the co-op. You just don't know until you figure out what the business is going to do. I want a nonprofit. Well, you know what? Most farmers don't make any profit, so you're in good shape. You know, I remember Mark Shepard said many years ago, and he had a lot of people going, oh, because they were all tarded, right? He said a nonprofit without a profitable entity attached to it is a professional begging organization. He wasn't saying nonprofits are bad, but what he was saying is the purpose of a nonprofit is you take a profitable entity and you create a nonprofit entity that goes after a mission, and surplus capital from the profitable entity goes to the nonprofit so that that entity can determine how some of its profits are used for the greater good. Not you just go around and beg everybody for money. People say they want to be a nonprofit, but they have no idea where their source of revenue would be from. Then why do you want to be a nonprofit? You don't know. Again, I'm back to we need to educate farmers, especially young people that say they want to be farmers, because most of them have no idea from a business standpoint what they're talking about. We also need to develop as many low-cost entry paths I think we can for would-be farmers. Microgreens is a great one. John Dowie, he's in and out of here once in a while. He's built his whole farm off microgreens. His farm is a building. It's a leased office space. Somebody could be in there running a mailroom out of it or something, but instead he's running a farm out of it. And he's a hustler, and he's reached out, and he's brought in other peripheral products, both stuff he produces and then stuff from third parties. And he's pushed that into his book of business. That's a pretty low entry path. But how much room is there for microgreen producers in most markets? And the answer is not that much. Not that much, because most of their business, not all, but most of their business is the higher end restaurants. And there's only so many higher end restaurants you can sell to. And there's only so many you can crack through, like the Cisco layer, right? I'm not talking about router layers, that kind of Cisco. I'm talking about Cisco, the food company, where they're not just going to order their shit off a giant catalog site. So there's only so much, but there's so much market. And so anything where people can get together and say, there's so many people, we should all get together and buy some land and go grow all our own food. Why don't you get together and sponsor a farmer who already has land to grow food for you? Why don't you do that? Why don't you see if you can turn that into a co-op? Why don't you go find 10 local farmers who would grow more food if they had a guaranteed distribution channel, and put together, instead of some of your friends, all of your friends, plus some you ain't made yet, and develop a distribution channel for local farmers, because they don't know how to do it. I'm telling you right now, they don't know how to do it. It's so rare that when one of them does do it, all the other farmers look at them like they're some kind of a god. Right? There's this one dude, I think he's somehow associated with Gabe Brown, but I'm not sure about that because he's more in the Midwest. But they load up a truck every week and go to Chicago and sell all the high-end restaurants. But most of the produce now is being produced by kids of the farmers. These farmers have, a 1,000-acre farm. Kid wants to farm. They don't trust the kid's newfangled crap. They give the kid a half an acre or an acre. They do mixed vegetables. And then that kid does not produce enough to warrant selling into Chicago every week. But all of them together do. So they get the truck, they load it up, they take orders this week for next week, and they bring product in for this week. And some of these kids are making $100,000 or more a year. I say kids, 16, 17, 18, some of them early 20s. They're making more money, and real money they keep, than their parents who own, 10 times or 20 times or 30 times the land they own. But again, that's a niche. But how many places like that can we create? Because again, the average farmer doesn't know anything about how to do this. If you have a business mind, you could be building small regional distribution channels for local producers. I'm going to tell you right now, though, the number one problem you'll run into is supply. It's not demand. You'll realize how little of this is actually going on. You'll realize how most of the produce you see in the store either comes from the Central Valley of California or South America or Australia, New Zealand, or Northern Europe, like Belgium. You'd be shocked at how many tomatoes are grown in glass houses in freaking Europe that end up in the United States. It's ridiculous. But it's there, and the more you build, the more, if you build it, they will come. Instead of building a baseball field for baseball players, you're building a market distribution for farmers. Then you'll have more farmers. If they could see where their food would go, and they would know that if I expand, if I do these things, if I add this crop, I have a market for it. You just might get more people doing it. Because right now, it's a great way to go broke. That's what farming is. It's one of the fastest and hardest and most miserable ways to go bankrupt. That's what we're trying to fix. This is why this show is now 2 hours in almost. Because and we're just scratching the surface. We're scratching the thumbnail here. We need better regional distribution, like the co-op model of selling weekly to restaurants, and maybe not locally, but regionally, right? 100 miles away or less, that type of thing. We need to identify smaller stores open to selling regional produce. I just wonder how much one person could get done inside a major market with just 2 plays. Identify every single local producer you can and find out what they have and what their pricing model is and put together a catalog. And go to every single small distribution location you can with that catalog and say, do you want to put some of this on your shelves? I just wonder how much can be done with just that. That's not going door to door and bothering Karen and Kyle and saying, you're supposed to be carrying Karen. You're supposed to care about your kids' food. Here, buy this really expensive pepper. I'm just saying consumers are already looking for product. There's already places selling product. There's already people making product. But again, I'm going to tell you, you're going to be back to demand will not be your problem. Supply will. There's a reason that this is worth doing. Because you're in a position where I don't know if there's a market in the world where demand so outstretches supply and so little is being done to meet demand. Again, just tell me if you're in the live stream here. Have you ever tried to find, just put me down, have you ever tried to find locally produced food and failed? Have you ever gone out and said, I want to buy locally produced beef, locally produced chicken, peppers that were grown across the street from me, whatever it is, and you just can't find the product? Or you find the product, but a very limited amount of the product at a very limited time. And you can't really make the, see, like, here's the way I look at it. Hierarchy of food quality. Best quality would be no chemicals, no additives out of your own backyard. Okay, I don't know what your percentage of that's going to be. It could be 10, it could be 40, but it's not going to be 100. So that's the best. The next best would be the same thing from somebody, within a few minutes ride or walking distance from your house. Like I buy beef sometimes from a guy that's literally 9/10 of a mile away from me. Okay? That would be like your next tier. And then your next tier would be, regenerative, no chem, whatever, somewhere from your region. And then everything else is lesser. But I would even say, like, down the road, guy using conventional fertilizer, but otherwise good practices is probably better than organic from California. And there's tremendous demand for that. But the supply's not there. If you go right now, you turn this podcast off, get in your car, drive to the closest grocery store, and go in and buy a piece of grass-fed beef from like Publix or Albertsons or Kroger's, there is a 90% chance or better that beef came from Brazil, Chile, New Zealand, or Australia. We grow lots of it here. Most of it goes to Europe. Everything's screwed up. But that's why there's such a huge opportunity. And it's all these little pieces being put together. I think there's a huge opportunity there. We also need to improve the farmers market reach. One is, like I said earlier, and I'm not going to go back to it, but the people running farmers markets that are limiting the amount of people that can be there, you are stupid. You will not grow your market. You will not grow your farmers market. It will not get bigger. People will continue to show up once or twice and not come back. There's nothing new. There's nothing changing. There's nothing exciting. I can walk the whole thing in 5 minutes. I might as well go to the grocery store where at least they have the stuff I'm looking for. You've got to start bringing more energy and more excitement in. The farmers markets I've seen that are huge, that completely are unregulated as to how many, like anybody that wants to buy a table can, and yes, they have some rules. They're successful. They're successful. Chefs come, like all the little ones I've seen are crap. And they never grow. And if I made it, like in Arkansas and Hot Springs, we had one, I made a commitment. Go every weekend for 6 weeks. I didn't meet anybody who was regularly attending the thing. Like I got to know some of the producers by name. But I'm like, oh, you were here last week? No, because people just don't. They just don't because they don't have enough traction. But we need to like make farmers markets cool. They need to be more than just a place for food. Like the one in Bastrop was really cool that I went to. Like they had a dude playing music and they had people selling, prepared foods, hot foods, things like that. That's the kind of thing you need. You need to make it like when you go to a farmer's market, it's fun. It's not just to get food. That's how you'll grow that distribution piece. And we just need to accept the primary problem in all of this is regulation and centralization. And the two tie into each other. When you remove regulation, you get decentralization. The more you regulate, the more you get centralization. That's why you would think that big corporations lobby the government to remove restrictions and regulations. That's the picture that's painted for you, like by your communists that taught your economics class, right, in school. But it's not what happens. It's not what happens at all. None of these lobbyists are like, deregulate us, daddy. They're like, regulate us harder, daddy. Why? Because they're all part of centralized systems. Centralized systems love regulation. When you're Cargill, right, when you're Del Monte, these regulations mean nothing to you. They mean that, first of all, they all get handed down to the people, the peons lowering your distribution. They absorb all the costs anyway. But the costs you do have to absorb, they're rounding errors. That's $1 million a year, but it protects $1 billion a year of business. I'll do that every day. I will happily pay $1 million to ensure that there is no competition against my $1 billion of business. It's a 1/1000th premium. But why don't we have a place where local people can take locally produced chickens and have them processed and then sell those chickens to other local people instead of like, I give you your chickens and you pay to have them processed? Why is the same facility able to do one but not the other? What's the difference? Let's say Aaron here grows 50 chickens. And Jack says, Aaron, I want some chickens. And Aaron says, how many would you like? I say 10. And Aaron either gives me the chickens alive or she takes them to the processor for me. I go down to the processor and sign for my chickens, and I take delivery from the processor. How is it any different than if Aaron goes down, has all the chickens processed, takes them back to her farm, throws them in her freezer, and when I say I want to buy a chicken from Aaron across the street, I go over and get the chicken and pay her for it? How is it any different from a safety standpoint? The answer is it isn't. It isn't. Why can't we do it? Regulation. What does the federal government say has to happen? They would say Aaron has to take that chicken to a different processing facility. And that some guy named, let's say, Bill works there. Bill works for the federal government. He works for, FDA. He's an inspector, USDA inspector. His entire salary has to be paid for by the facility. All his government benefits have to be paid for by the facility. Tyson, Purdue, et cetera, they lobby for this. They love it. Again, you would think they would hate it, but no, they love it. Because it means they don't have to compete with Aaron. They don't have to compete with Jack Spirko. Regulation is the biggest problem we have. So that's why we need to work on this from multi-pronged. And where I started was local regulation, state level regulation. I think that we need to come up with campaigns that will literally make your state, like, forget the federal government. The federal government exists to fuck you over and to own you like a slave. That's its purpose. The purpose of a system is what it does. It is much easier to influence politics at the state level. And we need to come at this from a standpoint of, if you oppose local food production, you're a horrible, horrible person. You hate the planet. You hate the polar bears. You hate the trans people. You hate everything. You're just evil. You think I'm kidding. I'm not. Like, we need to take their own weapons and put them right back on themselves. Lack of local food disproportionately affects trans people and minorities. I'm only half kidding there. I don't believe it, but I'm willing to use it as marketing. Why not fight fire with fire? Why can't we push this back on our state officials and say, Texas, why do you hate Texas farmers? Mr. Congressman, why do you hate farmers in your own state who work so hard to feed people? Why do you hate that? Why do you hate the environment? Why do you want people using chemicals when there's a better way? Why would you do that? Why are you opposing some housewife who's figured out that this big suburban yard she has could be a farm and she could sell to her neighbor? Why do you hate her? Why do you hate caring Karen, Mr. Congressman? Why? Why would you do that to Karen? Karen has 3 kids to feed. Karen could feed her kids and half her neighborhood if you would. Why? Why do you hate black people? You know, black people farm too, Mr. Congressman. Aren't you supposed to be for minorities? Why do you hate gay people? Gay people farm too. Do you know you're disproportionately affecting gay people? Why do you hate the planet? The planet's getting so warmed up and so hot. If we had more plants growing, there'd be less CO2 in the air. Why do you hate everything? And I'm only half pretending here. I'm only half joking. Like, it could be refined more, but that needs to be the message. If you stand in the way of deregulation of local food production, you are an enemy of everything good on the planet. So why, Mr. Congressman? Why, Mr. Governor? Why, Miss Lieutenant Governor? Why do you hate the planet and the people of your own state? Because that's how you get shit done. I'm telling you, that's how you get shit done. And it doesn't matter if they're vegans, right? We're talking about, yes, producing chickens, but we're also talking about producing peppers and tomatoes and eggplants, right? So the vegans have a stake in this too. Why do you hate the vegans, Mr. Congressman? Why can't Sally the vegan buy peppers from Karen who has Karen's farm? Why? Why would you do that? This approach, again, and it really is, I say scratching the surface. Think of taking like a staple and scratching the back of your thumbnail and barely making a mark on it. And you are the problem. And that's how much we covered today, even with this long. There is so much more to this. And one of the reasons I wanted to do this show is I want you to understand the scope of the problem. Because I know a lot of you end up talking to people in government and you talk to people who are farmers. And let me tell you what a farmer hears when you say something like, well, you don't need any of them chemicals. All you need to do is work with nature. They hear blah, 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 blah. I'm an idiot and I would be bankrupt if I were you. And they're right. You have no fucking idea what that person goes through to eke out an existence in one of the toughest industries in the world. You have no idea. Most of you didn't know before today what crop insurance was and how it gets leveraged against it. Most of you probably knew, but you never really thought about the fact that 2 farms, and one is great, deep, fertile soil, and one has completely worn out, denuded soils, will mortgage for the same sale price if they're the same number of acres in the same area. How stupid is that? This problem is ginormous. But what do I say about problems? As long as there's a problem, there's an opportunity. And so the more problems, or the bigger the problems, the greater the opportunity. I don't think there's a greater opportunity in the world than what we've talked about today. Not a greater. You know why? It is the single largest market in the world. It's bigger than energy, for Christ's sake. You tell me a market bigger globally than food. You tell me another market where literally every human being is a customer. Every human being is a customer. Well, electricity. Everybody's a customer for electricity. More than half the world doesn't even have it. Tell me a market bigger than food. There isn't one. There isn't one. Food is the largest market measured by customers in the world. And it's why a business that has to make a payroll in the millions of dollars per month can make a profit and do very well for itself at 1.5% margin. Because it's so big. It's like gasoline, pennies on the dollar. You go out and you're like, I can't believe they charged me $3.05 for gas. Well, the guy you bought the gas from probably charged you 4 or 5 cents. That's probably what he made. All the rest of the money went to the rest of the distribution channel. And that's how every need market is. So what I want to end with, for this to work, you have to shift the mindset of the producer and the consumer both from need to want. I will pay more for what I want than for what I need. I know that sounds retarded, but it's true. It's true. Person goes out to buy a car. Okay. There's 2 cars on the lot. They're optioned very, very similarly. Maybe one has a few features that the cheaper one doesn't, but the person doesn't care about it. One car is what I call old lady silver. You know what I'm talking about. It's that gray silver color. It is one of the most boring colors on the planet. The other car is cherry red or a dark blue or a really good looking emerald green. And the one that's a good color costs $5,000 more. Most people will spend the extra $5,000. Car doesn't do anything any different. What do they want? They want it to not look stupid. That silver old lady silver color is that gray silver. It's just a hard champagne, whatever you call it. It's an ugly color. It's ugly as shit. Nobody wants. I don't know why they make the damn things that way. I guess somebody wants them, but people will pay a premium because of a color. You don't think people will pay a premium to buy a product that was grown down the street that came with a story when their friends, their other yuppie friends are coming over and they can say in this dinner party that I bought, Karen can tell all her friends the honey that we put on the plate tonight, that was from a beekeeper 15 miles away that we buy from exclusively. And the peppers and the eggplant that we did the ratatouille with, that came from Susan's farm down the road. You don't think people will pay a premium for that? If so, you need that education in marketing and sales that I said our farmers need, because of course they will. With that, let's go ahead and wrap things up real quick. Want to remind you, if you like the work that we do and you want to support us, one of the ways you can do that is do your online shopping starting at tspaz.com. TSPAZ, tspaz.com. My item of the day for you today, I really like this product. I've been waiting to review it. I've had one for like 2 months, but it'd been out of stock, and it's because they sell out really quick. It's a retracting hose reel for a garden, like water hose from Vivora. 115 foot long. The reel itself kind of sort of reminds you of like a small outboard motor or something, the way it looks. Super easy to mount, 4 bolts. It comes with concrete anchors and 4 bolts if you want to put it into a wall. I put mine on a tree. There's a video showing it. You pull the hose out, you kind of tug up on it, it locks, you tug down on it, it retracts. Again, 115 foot long. I got a video that shows you how it works. It's just super slick. It really is. Check it out today. Again, it's the Vivora retracting hose reel. You can find it at tspaz.com or thesurvivalpodcast.com, and just scroll down. Another thing I want to remind you of, we do still have the MSB on sale. MSB is $50 a year. That's Member Support Brigade. It is on sale until next Monday. So it's a 2-week sale, $35 instead of $50. The discount code is TSPC is the discount code. If you become a member, you get your money back with the discounts, and you support this show at about 18 cents an episode. With the discount price, it's more like about 14 cents an episode. I'm going to take a few comments and questions here real quick. Some are just some super chats. Thanks for that. Anarchy gave me $7.77, said happy birthday to my wife, Nicole. Well, happy birthday to your wife too, but thank you for the super chat. I appreciate that. And hey, you want to get me to read something like happy birthday to your wife or something, super chat me, even for $1. They always get starred, even if you forget to, or I forget to mark it. Jesse says, how would a person go about testing the organic matter personally? You want to send a soil sample in to get tested for that, and they'll give you organic matter. That's a pretty standard test. You can do that like through, you can contact NRCS if you're a commercial operator or what have you, but there's plenty of like local extensions and stuff that'll do a test. That'll give you all the information on your soil, including your organic matter content. Horseshoe Lake Farms threw us a $9.99 super chat. Thank you for that. Jim says, how corrupted is the organic label? Better than nothing if you're shopping for produce. Is it better than nothing if you're shopping for produce? Okay. This is how I look at it. Organic equals less bad. That's it. That's it. And it equals less bad in the amount of toxins that you're going to consume eating it. That's all you get for the premium. Now, when I say less bad, okay, less bad for you, but not less bad total cost. Jeff Lawton a few years ago put out a video of what goes on in Baja, California on an organic carrot farm where these Mexican laborers are treated like worse than slaves. So there's a lot of organic operations that are completely above board and wonderful in what they do. And there's some that are as horrible or worse than any conventional operation when it stands to like how people are treated or even how land is treated in some instances. So my problem with organic is I don't want to say really bad things about it because there's so many organic producers that are really wonderful people doing a great job. But you don't know that's who you're getting product from just because it says organic on the label. The government touched it. Then the government centralized it. So the government has ruined it, even though it does mean something for some producers. We need a whole new way of looking at things. I want to know if I'm making a decision about food where I'm going to spend more money than I have to. I'm choosing to spend a premium. Where did this come from? Who grew it? What are their land management practices, etc.? John Kempf has something he's working called Integrity Grown for that as well. Victory Garden says, in addition to the email list, do you have more marketing, customer service, retention tools, maybe for another episode? Go to my website and search for entrepreneur, and you'll find tons of advice on that. I've done a tremendous amount with that over the years. Anyway, guys, hope you enjoyed today's show. I knew this would be long, but this went longer than I expected. But again, I'm hoping it paints a better picture for you about how big this problem is, because I wanted to do this as much because I know when I do a show like this, 1 or 2 or 3 people will go do something amazing. Like, it'll inspire them. They're not going to fix the whole problem. They're going to say, like, hey, you know what I can do? I can go out and I can just badger the shit out of my state legislature over this one issue until they do something, so I'll shut up and go away. Or someone else is going to be like, hey, that idea that Jack had, where you could put together a local co-op using existing production instead of one day I'm going to, like, somebody will do something with it. And I love that. But the bigger thing is so that we will stop saying stupid shit that hurt our cause. When you tell a farmer, but all you have to do is work with nature, you don't need any chemicals or inputs at all, that farmer says, this person is a moron who does not understand the world I operate in at all. And again, most of the time anyway, they're right. They're correct. You don't understand. You don't know. If you learned anything today from what I told you, like, shit, I didn't know that. Trust me, you don't know what it's like to be a farmer because I gave you 1/10 of 1% of the problem. That's all it was. It was 1/10 of 1% of the problem. If we're going to reach farmers, we need to learn to speak their language, understand their situation, and offer them solutions. If you talk to somebody as though you're their enemy, they will see you as their enemy. And I know you don't think you are, but when you tell someone who's like a 5th generation farmer what they don't need to be doing, all they hear is criticism of what they're doing. Some of it may even be justified, but you have not walked a mile in their moccasins. You don't understand. And if you think you can turn a battleship like you turn a go-kart, you're wrong. You know, somebody's farming, even a relatively small farm, a couple hundred acres, they can't just turn around 180 degrees and completely change all their practices overnight and not destroy themselves. Especially, like, let's say right now in June, in the middle of a growing season. And that guy's got a field to corn and you're telling me he's stupid for doing it, and he knows it's going to pay for his kids' tuition. He's not going to listen to you. You start using words he doesn't understand, like permaculture, he's not going to listen to you. You start saying, you know, there are some steps you could take to reduce your inputs and increase your profit. Whoa. I might not do it, but I'm listening. Those are words I understand. Have you ever thought about integrating livestock into your operation so you can increase your profit margin and your fertility at the same time? I might not do it, but I'm listening. You're using words I understand. You're not attacking me. Again, this I'm going to tell you, and then I'm going to end. The number one reason you have all these fanciful mental masturbation things of all my friends and I are going to get together and have a community and we're going to grow all our own food is because the people saying the words have no idea how hard it is to grow the food. They don't know anything. And so they live in this fanciful world where all you have to do is like the YouTube video I saw on food will just be everywhere. And the real bad part, like that's not bad in of itself because they mentally masturbate about buying land that they're never going to buy. Big freaking deal. I don't really care. Or they eventually do get it and then they learn it's hard and then they work through it. They learn how to do it. Again, I'm good with that. No, the problem is the interim where when they don't understand, why does this food cost more? Because you've never grown anything and you don't know how hard it is. Because you've been so lulled into this sense of entitlement. Because you can go out and you can buy this food so cheap, 360 days a year. It's there and it's cheap. And you have no idea the hardship and the misery that goes into making that food show up on your table. And you live in this fanciful world where you just throw the food in there. It's that Mitchell and Webb one. I'll put that out later today. Okay, because I can't look it up right now. I got to end. But there's a Mitchell and Webb. It's like a variety comedy show out of the UK. And the guy starts off like, hey, you want to make a bit of money, right? And I think got like this big bag of money. Like, I just found out about farming. You throw the corn on the ground and it grows and you sell it and you get money, you know? And he's like, you got a sheep. You pull the wool off. You sell it for money. And it fucking grows back, right? And like they just make it like it's so easy, and it's fine for being funny, but it's not real. Farming is hard. Everything is your enemy. The weather is your enemy. The insects are your enemy. The deer are your enemy. The rabbits are. But work with nature, and eventually you can design and develop and manage a system. And you can figure out how to deal with all of those things. But they're still against you. They're still trying to destroy you. Again, go put a garden in. Eventually you'll get good at it. And when you do, don't forget how hard it was so that you can respect the people that grow your food. And in Molly Englehart's words, being able to eat very inexpensive food that was grown by people who are chemically killing themselves so you can have it, that's the world of privilege. Paying a fair price for food that was ethically produced, that's just value for value exchange. I'll catch you tomorrow with another one, guys.